The payroll system showed my access revoked and listed a new approver for my department. HR said the change had been requested by my interim director and was already active. I tried to approve a contractor payment that morning and the system rejected my signature. The message said, "Pending authorization from department approver." I met him because he covered my shift. A storm took out a bridge on my commute, and I called in to say I'd be late. He was already there, already logged in, already moving tasks so nothing stalled. When I arrived, he handed me a coffee and said it was fine. Everything was handled. He was younger and temporary, brought in to stabilize things after a restructuring. He didn't sit in my chair. He hovered near the edges, picked up slack, noticed where things jammed. He asked questions that sounded like curiosity, not audit. I run a small team. Budget's tight, timelines unforgiving. He stayed late without being asked. Built trackers that actually worked. Sent end-of-day summaries that made mornings easier. When I forgot something, he caught it before it cost us. The closeness formed through relief, through not being the only one holding the thread. He learned my rhythms. When approvals needed nudging. When vendors stalled. When I skipped lunch. He left protein bars in my drawer without comment. When I traveled, he kept the lights on and sent screenshots so I could sleep. The first night he stayed over was after a deadline broke loose and we worked until the cleaners came. He crashed on the couch in my office, shoes off, laptop closed. In the morning, my inbox was empty and everything was queued. After that, he was just there. Not always. Reliably. He started sitting in on calls at my request. Took notes. Followed up. When a contract amendment needed a quick signature and I was in transit, he said he could route it. He knew where the forms lived. He knew who would ask questions. I gave him limited authority, just enough to keep things moving. HR sent notices addressed to him with me copied. He forwarded them with highlights. When the system updated, he helped me set new permissions. He said it was easier if there was a single point of contact during transition. He said it wouldn't last. I signed what he put in front of me because it matched what we were already doing. The work smoothed out. My team stopped escalating. Vendors stopped circling. I slept. The morning my access disappeared, I was already at my desk. My badge still opened the door. My name was still on the wall. Just not in the system that moved money. HR said it was temporary. They said the interim director had requested consolidation. They said it reduced risk during audits. They said I was still valued. They asked if I wanted him looped in on the call. I said no and closed the door, watching him through the glass as he spoke to my team. Calm and precise, like this was what he'd been preparing for. I didn't feel replaced. I felt managed. After that morning, nothing was officially different. He didn't move into my office. Didn't take my chair. He sat where he always had, angled so he could see my screen if I waved him over. He still asked before sending anything external. Still used my language in emails. Still deferred to me in meetings. The access just didn't come back. When I asked HR to restore it, they said the audit window was still open. They said consolidating approvals prevented duplicate liability. They said it was cleaner. They said he was authorized to act on my behalf. I forwarded the message to him. He replied with reassurance. Said it would resolve soon. Said these things always took longer on paper than in practice. Said nothing had actually changed. The team adapted faster than I did. They started copying him first, asking him for sign-off, looping me in as context. When I corrected the flow, he smoothed it over without contradicting me. Said it was just habit forming. Said he'd redirect. He didn't. He began attending meetings I hadn't been scheduled for. He sent summaries afterward, concise, accurate. When I asked why I hadn't been invited, he said it was short notice. He said he'd assumed I was busy. He was usually right. The closeness deepened at work before it did anywhere else. Late nights. Shared silence. The way he brought me tea without asking when my voice went flat. The way he took things off my plate without framing it as help. He learned where my authority mattered and where it could be replaced without friction. One evening after everyone had left, he closed my door and asked how I was holding up. Not professionally. Personally. I said I was tired. He said that was understandable. He said transitions were harder on people who cared. He stayed late again. Ordered food. Ate at the conference table. When a vendor emailed about an overdue approval, he answered it before I finished reading. He CC'd me. Used my phrasing. I didn't stop him. The next day, finance sent a notice. Budget adjustments approved. My name appeared in the body. His signature block was at the bottom. I asked him about it. He said the system auto-populated. He said the money still reflected my decisions. He said this was what delegation looked like. I let that settle. He started asking about my workload outside the office. Travel. Family. How much I was carrying. He said knowing helped him anticipate. He said it made him better at covering for me. The first time he came to my place was unplanned. A power outage in his building. He showed up with his laptop and a sheepish apology. We worked at my kitchen table until midnight. When it got late, I offered the couch. In the morning, he left before I woke. The files were synced. The approvals queued. At work, the systems continued to route around me. I noticed it when a request I'd been expecting never arrived. I found it later in a shared folder, completed. Time-stamped. His initials where mine would have been. I asked if he'd meant to loop me in. He said it was time-sensitive. He said he'd been confident. He said the outcome matched what I would have done. He was right. That was the problem. By the end of the week, my calendar had fewer meetings and more open blocks. He said it was intentional. He said focus was important. He said he wanted to protect my time. Protected things didn't need to be consulted. When HR sent another update confirming the interim structure would remain through the quarter, they addressed it to him. I was copied below the greeting. He forwarded it with a short note. Almost there. I closed the message and watched him through the glass again, explaining a decision I hadn't known needed to be made, using my priorities with his voice. Didn't feel hostile. It felt efficient, and it was already working without me. The midpoint came disguised as relief. Finance announced a temporary freeze on discretionary spending. Tight window. Fast decisions. He called me into the small conference room and said it was good timing. He said the consolidation meant we wouldn't lose momentum. He slid a document across the table. Not a contract. A memo acknowledging interim authority for approvals under threshold. He said it formalized what the system was already doing. He said it would keep auditors from flagging delays. He didn't watch me sign. He stood by the window and talked about weather patterns like we were waiting for a call to end. After that, the pace increased without friction. Approvals cleared faster. Vendors responded quicker. My team stopped asking me questions they already knew he would answer. He didn't contradict me in public. He didn't need to. The midpoint wasn't conflict. It was calm. HR sent a message confirming the interim structure would extend through the quarter. Addressed to him. I was copied. He forwarded it with a single line. This gives us breathing room. I noticed my badge access changed that same week. Still worked for the building. Still worked for my floor. Didn't open the finance suite anymore. I assumed it was related to the audit. I didn't ask. He started attending leadership meetings in my place. Sent notes afterward. Accurate. Neutral. When I replied with a correction, he thanked me and said he'd incorporate it next time. Next time came and went. The closeness between us stayed intact. He still checked in. Still asked how I was sleeping. Still noticed when I skipped meals. He framed everything as support. He said it mattered that I felt steady. One evening after a long day, he asked if I trusted him. It didn't feel like a test. Felt like care. I said yes. That answer smoothed something I hadn't realized was rough. The next morning, an automated notice hit my inbox. Delegation updated. Approval hierarchy revised. Effective immediately. My name was still there. Just not first. I forwarded it to him with a question mark. He replied that this was expected. He said it aligned with best practice. He said it didn't change my role. He said titles mattered less than outcomes. That afternoon, A decision I would have made crossed my desk as an FYI. Already done. Already communicated. Already accepted. I read it twice. It was right. That was when the midpoint settled. Not as loss, but as displacement that no longer required resistance. By the time I realized I hadn't approved anything all week, nothing was waiting for my approval. And the systems, once redirected, didn't circle back. They moved forward. After that, my authority thinned without a visible edge. Decisions arrived as notifications instead of questions. He copied me on outcomes. Approved. Adjusted. Resolved. When I replied with a suggestion, he acknowledged it and said he'd factor it in going forward. Going forward became his phrase. The team adapted completely. They stopped checking with me before acting. They checked with him. He didn't discourage it. He told them to keep moving. He told them speed mattered during uncertainty. I started being invited to meetings as context, not as decision maker. I spoke when asked. When I wasn't, he summarized my position accurately enough that interrupting felt unnecessary. One afternoon, a vendor called my direct line for the first time in weeks. He sounded confused. He said he'd been told to route everything through the interim director. He asked if that was still correct. I said yes because saying no would have required proving I still had a place to send it. That evening, HR stopped by my office. Not formally, just to check in. They said the transition was going well. They said my flexibility was noted. They said it was good to see collaboration under pressure. They asked if I had any concerns. I said no. He stayed late that night. Closed my door the way he always had. Asked if I was eating enough. Asked if I was sleeping. Asked if there was anything he could take off my plate. I told him I felt unnecessary. He said that wasn't true. He said I was essential. He said the fact that things were running smoothly proved it. He said leadership wasn't about control. He said it was about building systems that worked even when you stepped back. He said I'd built something strong. I let that sit. The next morning, my calendar populated with fewer meetings again. He said he cleared my schedule so I could focus on strategy. He said day-to-day decisions were handled. Handled meant completed. I tried to initiate something, an idea I'd been holding. I drafted a proposal and sent it to him for alignment. He replied quickly, said it was solid, said timing wasn't right, said we could revisit after the audit. After the audit kept moving. Finance circulated a report addressed to him. I was included as reference. My department's performance was praised. My name appeared once as background. He forwarded it with a note. Great work by the team. I thanked him. Later that week, my badge failed at the executive floor entirely. Security apologized and reissued a temporary pass that allowed escorted access only. They said it was standard during reviews. I didn't tell him. I watched from my office as he walked past the glass with someone from leadership, gesturing lightly, speaking in the tone I'd used for years. He looked comfortable, legitimate. The distance between us stayed gentle. He didn't cut me off. He didn't push me out. He simply stood where decisions happened and kept moving forward. By the time I realized I hadn't been asked my opinion on anything substantive in days, there was nothing left waiting for it. The work continued. So did he. And I was still there, fully informed, fully present, no longer required. The change showed up as gratitude. Leadership sent a note praising stability during transition. It named him, thanked the team, and mentioned me as support. The wording was careful, generous, final. He forwarded it with a smile emoji and said this was good. He said recognition mattered. He said it would protect the department long term. I replied with a thank you and meant it. After that, my tasks narrowed further. Reviews, mentorship, documentation, things that preserved knowledge without directing it. He said this was where my experience had the most leverage. He said he wanted me doing what only I could do. He was right. I trained people who no longer reported to me. I documented processes I no longer owned. I answered questions that no longer needed my approval. That afternoon, one of my team members came to my desk with a vendor issue I used to resolve in seconds. I opened the system out of habit, then had to tell her to take it to him instead. The intimacy shifted into reassurance. He checked in more often, asked how I was feeling about the pace, asked if I needed time off, said he could cover anything. He began suggesting I take leave, not pushing, framing it as rest I'd earned. He said the department was in good hands. He said nothing would stall. HR emailed about accrued time, generous balance, encouragement to use it. They copied him. I told him I was thinking about it. He said he supported whatever I decided. The following week, a reorg draft circulated. Titles adjusted. Reporting lines clarified. My title stayed the same. My reporting line shifted. I now reported to him. The email described it as alignment. It described it as interim. It described it as efficient. I didn't reply. He came by later and said he should have told me first. He said the timing moved faster than expected. He said this didn't change how he saw me. He said it was temporary. He said it would make things easier. I asked how. He said fewer bottlenecks. The first approval request came from him that afternoon. Routine. Something I would have signed myself months ago. I signed it and sent it back. He thanked me. The next one came the next day. Then another. Each time he framed it as collaboration. Each time I signed, he started scheduling check-ins. Short, efficient. He asked for updates on work he now owned. He listened. He nodded. He decided. I noticed how carefully he avoided sounding like my manager. He said we were partners. He said hierarchy was just paperwork. When I mentioned feeling sidelined, he said that wasn't his intent. He said transitions created strange optics. He said my value wasn't measured by approvals. He said I was still needed. I believed him because I was still busy. The moment that stayed with me happened late one evening. I stayed to finish something that no longer had a deadline. He stopped by my office, leaned against the doorframe and said I didn't need to stay. He said he had it. I said I was almost done. He smiled and said that was what he admired about me. He said dedication like that built strong teams. Then he said I should go home. I shut down my computer and left because he was right and because there was nothing left to finish that mattered. In the elevator, I realized I hadn't made a decision in weeks that hadn't been filtered, approved, or acknowledged by him first. Not because I couldn't, because there was no longer a place for it to land. The meeting invite came from HR with his name in the subject line. Mandatory, brief, administrative. I walked in with my notebook and sat where I always had. He sat at the head of the table, HR on the side, coffee already poured, my name printed on a single sheet in front of them. They said the audit had concluded. They said the interim structure had proven effective. They said leadership valued continuity. They said the role would be made permanent. They said he'd accept it. They said my position would be adjusted to reflect the new structure. Advisor. No direct reports. Same salary for now. Same benefits. Clean exit if I wanted it later. They asked if I had questions. I asked when the decision had been made. They said it had evolved. They asked if I was comfortable. I said yes. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. After the meeting, he walked me back to my office. Not as escort, as habit. He said he hoped I understood. He said this wasn't personal. He said the organization needed decisiveness. He said I'd taught him most of what he knew. He said that mattered. By the end of the day, my system access updated again. Fewer tools, fewer fields. My approvals no longer routed anywhere. My calendar cleared itself. A box appeared on my desk. Not from security. From him. Inside were the protein bars he'd kept stocked, my spare charger, a folder of notes I'd written months ago. Things that belonged to me but no longer fit where I was sitting. The team stopped by one, thanked me, said they'd learned a lot, said they hoped I'd stay in touch. He stood at the glass wall and talked about next steps. I packed slowly. There was no rush. I still had a badge. Still had a title on paper. Just not in practice. At home that night, I opened my laptop out of reflex. No alerts. No requests. No decisions waiting. My phone buzzed once. A message from him. He said he hoped I'd take some time. He said transitions like this were hard on people who carried things alone for too long. He said he was grateful for the trust I'd given him. He said he wouldn't have been able to do it without me. I didn't reply. The next morning, an automated email arrived confirming the reporting change and wishing me success in my adjusted role. It was signed by HR and copied to him. I closed it and sat at the kitchen table, realizing that the work hadn't been taken from me all at once. It had been accepted from me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left that required my consent. And the last thing I understood was that trust hadn't been broken. It had been processed.